a very interesting, extensive work on multi-cloud, which I saw in LinkedIn 2 days back, and that kind of triggered this thought. And I later discovered that in May again you had done a precursor to that work that you had done, right? That was again a pretty long one. So it's quite big, and there's a lot of elements to it. But so I thought it's a good thing for us, all of us, to have a talk around that. And I think it's classically multi-cloud is something, it affects us in different ways. So, and as I was thinking about it, at least my perspective is that whether we like it or not, most of the organizations today have a multi-cloud scenario. So, and it might not. So for me, if you look at it, most of my applications, they are hosted on DigitalOcean. So we use that as an infrastructure as a service. But the authentication of my application happens through Google, which is again a cloud service. And then a lot of my reporting now runs with Power BI, which is a Microsoft cloud. And then there are some image and photo processing we use, which is from a service called Cloudinary, which is again a cloud service, which is software as a service, which we can do clipping and cutting, other things like that. And then there are certain forms that we use. For that, we use another software as a service, which is again a cloud service by itself, right? So if you look at it, something for a small company as much as mine, I have at least 5 clouds working. Oh yeah, I forgot. I do use SharePoint as well, right? So no, not that way, Sanjay. I know we have been that. I use SharePoint just for one specific purpose, to work with Power BI, not like a regular user. Okay. And of course, as a company, we use G Suite for mail and messaging and G Drive, like that. Okay. And working with customers, use Teams. So that's again another cloud service. So if I look at it, then it kind of dawned on me that, you know what, I'm a multi-cloud user. Okay. And one of the challenges which I've been facing is that I talked to my engineering lead, and currently a lot of our backups happen on G Drive, right? And it kind of gets filled up a little easily. And it's part of our subscription. And he was suggesting maybe we should go to AWS because it's a little cheaper over there, the storage. But I was concerned that, you know, I have one more cloud service to manage. I'm managing G Suite now. I'm managing DigitalOcean. Okay. And I'm managing subscriptions to Power BI, Microsoft Cloud. And now I have one other monkey on my back, right? So that is a little bit of concern. And oh yeah, and of course GitHub, right? That's another cloud service. So it's, then I kind of think like so many things, right? And it kind of, in one way, it is daunting. But if I just go to one, will it solve my problem? I don't think that can again happen, because I don't think AWS can give what a GitHub or a Power BI gives me. So it gets very interesting, and this is the conundrum I was facing. And when I read that article, right, initially it looked like I had nothing to do with it. But then when I thought a little bit more, then I said, oh no, yeah, I mean, like, it does matter to me, right? And I am already impacted by the multi-cloud that exists today. So maybe we could talk something more, right? What spurred you into writing that, right? And from your perspective, again, you would be more of a consumer, right, than a provider of a cloud service. So what spurred you into writing that article?
Yeah. So yes. So see, right now I'm more of a consumer, but earlier I've been as a provider for a long time. And what you just mentioned, right? Multi-cloud, every organization is thinking into that, is getting into that kind of problem that you just stated, that whether I like it or not, all organizations are already multi-cloud. And though the articles that I wrote were very bit I did a filtering a bit, that there I'm referring to clouds as a public clouds, and public clouds are more of compute and storage things, which are primarily infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Those articles have been written with that context, but multi-cloud actually is what you exactly said, is including infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS, which all of us are use almost every day, software as a service. And then also include your hybrid infrastructure, because most enterprises will have that also. Now, similar to what you had, right? And same problem is there in every organization, including in my organization, that when we're looking at it, okay, how do we do this? And that's and when I kind of started exploring this area a little more, I realized that there is a lot of confusion in the people. Generally, okay, by default, when we hear multi-cloud as an IT guy, what I realize is most people think that multi-cloud is one application can deployed on more than one cloud. That's multi-cloud, and that's not the case. So that was one thing that I wanted to kind of clarify, that one application could be in only one cloud. For example, let's say it is in Azure, or let's say it's in Google Cloud and all that. But as a group, you might be using multiple clouds. So example for your company, right? You just mentioned Kumaran. So there could be one application in one cloud and another application in another. As a company or as a group, you are still multi-cloud. So that's what I was, that's one thing that I wanted to clarify, that multi-cloud is not that one application has to be deployed on multi-cloud. And then another thing that I kind of realized that, and that's there in the many articles when I was exploring that you will use multi-cloud to save money. And one of the reasons was that when you are using, let's say, one cloud and then you start adopting another cloud, let's say you're using Azure and then you start adopting AWS or even otherwise, you can do a better negotiation with the vendor and do that. And that's, and but when I started looking into all the things that you need to do to manage, multi-cloud is, you won't do that for money. For example, most cloud providers, I've experienced with 3 major ones, right? They give you discount based on how much you consume the cloud. For some it is constant, and for some it is based in the deal. But more you consume, the more discounts you will get. For example, even in Google Cloud, that's built in, that if you use a particular virtual machine for the whole month, if you use it for so many days, you will get this discount applied. If you use it for all the while, for a month, you get more discount. That I'm not talking about that. That is anyway built into the cloud providers. When you go and do a deal with a vendor, that time how much amount you are ready to commit to the cloud, you get the discount. Now, when you get into multiple clouds, you're going to distribute your expenses, so your consumption in each cloud will get lesser, and that way you will not get the discounts. So there were a lot of such confusions in the people. I thought, let me kind of try whatever I have learned in this space, let me share that, and that's how I wrote the articles.
So actually that's an interesting perspective, right? Like you actually might not reduce cost by reducing consumption. There could be another typical conventional ways to think, if I reduce consumption, the cost will come down. But with multi-cloud, there's a different approach to that, right? It could be like, it's kind of counterintuitive, like, let me go with one long-term deal and then that might help. Gautam, in your thing, right? Like yours is more enterprise, it's larger kind of a scenario, and I think it's an interesting mix, because if you have we have different kinds of demographic architects here. Deepak, as you know, tech provider, right? Gautam is a classical retail, IT, consumer enterprise. Nishant is a services company who works with others, and Aqua Connect is again another startup focused towards B2B. So we'll have different perspectives. So Gautam, in your case, right, a non-IT services company, how do you look at cloud, right? This multi-cloud thing, how is it playing out for you?
I can totally correlate what Sanjay was actually telling, because right now, as we speak, we are actually doing a cloud migration. And when we speak with multiple cloud providers, they always say that, okay, we give you a huge discount. Maybe if I give a 2-3 years or a 5-year commitment, they give us up to a 30% discount, right? So, and that kind of a discount I would not be able to get on a single cloud, multi-cloud, right? Because if I split my resources across everyone, I am still going to pay a premium for it. Correct. So that is one major challenge, because obviously sitting in the other side, basically from the retail side or from the company, from the industry, we always see the cost as one of the major factor for evaluation, right? So that way we always think that, okay, multi-cloud might not make sense for us, and it is also difficult to prove to our business, saying that why do I need to go for a multi-cloud instance when I'm getting more discount in a single cloud provider, right? And also, why do I need to split across multiple clouds? It is only if I'm going to have one specific service which is more a monopoly with them, right? If I'm going to have, say, a Kubernetes, like I actually read your article, Sanjay, because Anand Kumaran has actually liked it, and I followed you also. I read that article, right? So basically, I've seen that, okay, if you're more of a monopoly in that particular space, that's when you will have to go with them. Otherwise, on a cloud instance, I don't think it is going to be a challenge for them to host it in one specific, on a Azure or a AWS or on a Oracle. I don't think that is going to be a challenge. But my key questions, maybe I am just putting forth the question to you, Sanjay, is that since I'm doing kind of evaluation on the cloud, I'm still wondering how would a multi-cloud environment help me out when I'm going to say, suppose, what do you call it, the price of it, right? So, sorry, I actually forgot the question which I'm having.
We'll do one thing. We'll just come back. We'll just formulate it.
No, so the mobility. Sorry. So
Okay.
I was having a question on mobility, Sanjay. So suppose in case of AWS, right? If I'm going to have my application on AWS, and if I want to move it within AWS, it's going to be quite easier for me, right? Because it's just a switching of account, and I'm already up and running in a AWS to AWS instance. Whereas in case of AWS to Azure or AWS to Oracle Cloud, I will also have to develop a parallel instance, and only then I can do a switchover. But in case of a multi-cloud, if I'm having my application split across 2 or 3 different cloud instances, how will I be able to transfer it within one cloud to another? How would I be able to do that?
Okay, we'll hold that question. We'll come to that. So basically, it is about what will my lock-in? How would I plan my let's say migration or movement later, and kind of avoid a lock-in, right, or vendor lock-in?
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, it's not about that. So my question is
Technology perspective.
Okay. Yeah. So in case I am tied up with AWS, the migration from a AWS to AWS is just a matter of, okay, they call something called as a AMI, right? So
Okay.
AMI image, they just take a AMI image and you can just port it from one instance to another. It is just a backup, unzip and turn on, something of that sort. So each and every cloud instance has their own copyrighted technology of getting the backup. So basically, they are restricting ourselves to allow. They don't allow you to migrate from one cloud service provider to another, right? So that restriction is still there. Maybe Amazon says AMI, Azure says they have their own copyrighted or a patented way of taking the backup image. So everyone has their own set of backups. So in
You
that
may be in
way,
luck
how
actually.
would
You may be in luck because vendors today are more aware of your demand that you want multi-cloud, that they are making this possible actually today. So what you're asking for is actually, it may not be elegant, but it is actually possible today.
not really, Deepak. I would like to challenge here because
Yeah.
I will kind of address this particular question, Kumar, and you can get back to that. But so, Gautam, you are absolutely right. They're not ideal ways to do it. Cloud providers want to create stickiness, and that's what they're doing. However, the kind of example that you're taking, which is primarily about the virtual machines, it is much easier to do that. And as Deepak was saying, that cloud vendors give you a capability to do this. For example, in Azure, there's something called Azure Site Recovery, which can let you pick a VM from AWS, convert it into Azure without a downtime, because it will start doing replication and you can switch over. However, the challenge is when you're using more of a native technologies, cloud or the PaaS technology. For example, if you're using Azure SQL database, or let us say RDS in AWS. If you want to create a replication of that, there is no way that you can do that. If you were using a VM and you were using something like Oracle, you can use something as ActiveSync in an Azure, easier. But if you're using an RDS, there is no way that you can actually use the backup and restore to this. So there are vendors who are coming in to kind of help you. We'll have to figure out what are the ways. But as you move up the platform, things even become more complex when you move to SaaS. For example, Kumaran is using G Suite, right? He has data there, and he wants to say, if Google goes down, okay, that's a bigger problem, But there are companies who are looking at that. If I'm using everything in G Suite, and if Google goes down, what do I do? And there are already vendors who are giving you an option to even take a backup of your SaaS data such as G Suite and put it, but they are not ideal solutions for that.
Venkat, what is your what are the different clouds that you use, and how do you manage the challenge? Like being a small company, you have a different challenge. It's like you don't have a separate admin team and things like that. So what is your challenges?
So if you take our infrastructure as we use the multi-cloud architecture, as you said, we are using like Google for our productivity, do something like email, calendar, and file sharing, etc., etc. And for hosting, we use AWS. And for project management, again, we use Azure. And for code maintenance and deployment, we use GitHub and etc. So for usage of multi-cloud architecture is unavoidable. And so there are many reasons for that. One is like we cannot see that each provider is expertise for like some of the solutions, right? So for example, we are more used GitHub for our code management. So if you wanted to use the same thing for a different provider, like there is we are not comfortable. I'm not saying it is a difficult, and since we are already comfortable with some other provider, for example, email, and email we are comfortable with G Suite, and we don't want to change it even there is a solution like sorry. Okay. Wait a minute.
Okay. So, Nishant, what is your how does this multi-cloud thing impact when you are rendering services?
Yeah, I was just listening to what Sanjay and Gautam like. Actually, we are also in the stage of migrating to our application is currently running in on-prem, and we are in the stage of migrating to cloud. So I think when we talk about all these things, one thing that is coming in my mind is all what matters here is the financial engineering. That's the thing I think I can relate. Like the financial engineering means it's a general tendency. Like when we start or a discussion or a negotiation with a cloud vendor, especially when we act as a cloud consumer, it's like a normal business. They would start saying like, "What if you run this application for this period of time? Then we would give discount on us." So automatically, my point is like when we have such discussions and negotiation, we should set a clear boundary of our core application. I mean, in the architecture of our core application, like it's a normal tendency that we started using their managed service. As Sanjay said, like if we lock with say AWS RDS, then it would be difficult to migrate to a different cloud vendor at a point of time. But if we just simply using their VM or the if we set up a DB in one of the VM, then we can easily, the other cloud providers would give easy provision to switch from the current cloud system to their system. So the one thing we should be more care is like our architecture or application should be maximum as cloud agnostic, and if possible we should avoid the vendor lock things, like because that's also that's a topic I think I just tried to ask in the last meeting also. What should be the balance here? Like even if we say the financial engineering, the time to market also would be a matter. Like say if we especially in the current COVID situations and all, because in the airline industry, all airlines are in a very aggressive stage to how to reduce costs and how to try out new digital things and technology things, and how they can use the technology aspects to bring the travelers or bring back to the pre-COVID situation. So they all go for an MVP mode. Like they want if they opt for a new innovation, they want to make that MVP live and just see the benefits out from that. And so time to market is going to be a very important thing. So in that case, actually, it's like a time to market, the financial engineering, especially when we act as a SaaS, software as a service, we have to find a balance. The architecture should be in a cloud agnostic, and we should not go into a vendor lock mode. That's the main point that I would like to say on this.
That's a very good point. I think I'll just add a couple of things to that, and I'll ask Sanjay and Deepak on their opinions, right? So there are two aspects, right? Like for example, if you take let's say Nishant, Venkat and me, I would actually look at us more like a SaaS. So we are providing SaaS to our end customers, and then obviously we are consuming cloud services and then providing it. Now, one of the key things for me is, for example, why am I using Power BI? Because I think obviously it reduces my time to market, right? And most of the reports I am doing without getting my dev team involved. Okay, and so that makes it very fast, right? So that is when I'm using a specific feature. Now, when I say Power BI, obviously I cannot. When I'm kind of build stuff using the Power BI capability, right? I cannot, it's just virtually impossible to go to AWS or something else, because I'm just using something very specific to that, right? It is a kind of vendor lock-in. But that PaaS is what gives me that flexibility. Then there is something in between. For example, I think, let's say Venkat is using GitHub. You could use source code repository even within Azure DevOps. Okay, so there you have some bit of a leeway. You have to do some song and dance to migrate, or mail. I can do some song and dance and migrate. It's painful to move from one provider to another, but you can. But then for the Power BI kind of a scenario, I simply can't. I have to do it within them, or I had to use some custom reporting solution and then do it as an infrastructure as a service, which means my time to market becomes higher and the cost becomes higher. Okay. And then there is something that is very generic as an infrastructure as a service, which is easier. So considering that there are these 3 types of scenarios. A specific SPAS only that provider can give me. The other one is something like where I can have some amount of functionality. Functionally, they offer the same thing, but from a feature-wise perspective, there'll be a difference, just like GitHub and Azure DevOps as code itself. And third would be something as an infrastructure service where you could do a lift and shift. So Venkat, in your case, you use code, you use GitHub for code, right? Repository.
Yeah, we use GitHub for code.
Okay, so why didn't you shift to Azure DevOps? Azure DevOps also has got a code repository, right? Why are you not using that?
Yeah, actually, that's we tried, and we are having some technical problem, like while shifting the code. So there are some we were at the time of shifting, we faced some technical problem. As you said, we tried.
Your voice kind of broke up. You said you had a technical problem in migrating from GitHub to Azure DevOps, is it?
Yeah.
So maybe Deepak, how do you let's say, how would you handle, or how do you think we should handle it?
So actually, I mean, since I work with a lot of customers who have similar issues, and I'm going to, for the moment, I'm going to put your architecture hat on and think about it from that perspective and say, why would I choose to be either build myself, or I would buy a SaaS service, or I use something which is entrenched or so-called vendor lock-in with a particular cloud provider, right? So all these factors which you just mentioned. One is time to market. If I'm in a hurry, I need to get it done quickly. I just need something done for reporting. I might as well just use Power BI and be done with it. At least I'm skipping some steps which I would have done if I were to implement my own solution for building my own reporting stuff, all those things, display, graphics, all those things which are being given to me as a service, right? Now, what also needs to be considered is how critical is it for me to really build this thing for myself, right? Suppose if let's say I am using some codes solution, right? Let's say GitHub or Azure DevOps, or let's say GitLab, all these are equivalent sort of solutions, right? Now, in this scenario, what I need to see is how critical is this feature for me, right? If I move from one provider to the other, is it going to break down my productivity to such a level that I need to be concerned about it and be concerned about this vendor lock-in? If there is no concern, it says, okay, maybe I have to train my users a little bit. Maybe I need to fix a little bit of my workflow here and there. It is not a big deal. I move it. Then I'm not really vendor locked in, even though I'm using a sort of a SaaS service, right? Whereas if you are building something which is core to your business, right? Where you want, this is making revenue for my company. This is like, if I don't have this, things will go bad, right? That is where you start considering these solutions where it says, okay, I need to have full control over this. I need to be able to move it across clouds. I need to be able to, if for whatever reason Google goes down, Azure goes down, I need to have some way of recovering from it, right? So that has to be part of the architecture strategy. And just to come to the financial engineering part, which Nishant mentioned, today, one of the things with the cloud is that people have to expose their APIs, and that is how a lot of the vendors are actually. So, for example, for Azure to build something which interoperates with AWS, all they have to make sure is that it works with their API. They don't really even have to take their permission to do it, right? So, in fact, I was looking at one interesting company. There's a company called Wasabi, right? There's a company called Wasabi. They provide cloud storage, right? it is 100% compatible with S3. Right?
Okay.
So you can use absolutely the same API, change the URL, instead of sending it to AWS, send it to Wasabi, and they give you 90% discount of whatever AWS is doing. Right?
Oh, okay.
So because AWS has to give that API out and they have to make it public, they have to make it work, there are opportunities for other providers to bring the cost down. So if you are in that situation, look for those compatible API solutions. I'm sure there will be some catches to the solution, but this financial engineering is possible. But the decision of whether to choose something has to come from what capability you are looking for and how critical it is for your business to actually have that capability. Right? And if you can live with small changes, you are not really vendor locked in. So I don't consider vendor lock-in to be such a big deal, especially for things which are not very critical for your business. So run-of-the-mill services, you should be able to switch wherever you want. You may have some trouble, right? Now you have to decide whether it is worth the trouble or not. This is all the vendors count on your unwillingness to go through the trouble. If you are willing to go through a trouble, there is no vendor lock-in. That is my 2 cents about it.
Okay. And it kind of brings us to our favorite thing, that somehow we end up at this point in most of the architecture discussions, right? It starts off as one technology thing, and finally it boils down to how does it matter to the business, right? In terms of giving value to the customer. And that seems to be when we kind of keep double clicking, I think that's what that really matters, right? At the end, like for example, for my customer, what does it matter? Like, can I keep it giving? Can I give my customers the quick change in features? Will I put them in trouble? I think that is a thing which also comes out. For in your case, Sanjay, right? How does this? So it's kind of interesting in your case, right? You will work with your own organization, which is a consumer. You work with other customers for whom you develop solutions. So in that case, how do you approach this?
So it was interesting to hear about it. So one of the things that I've kind of learned, I would say that is one of the biggest mistake that people will do when doing multi-cloud is to make everything portable between all the clouds. And in some of the, I think, article or somewhere, even Gartner has said this as one of the biggest mistakes. The reason is, the moment you have to ensure that your solution works everywhere, you'll have to limit yourself to what your lowest common denominator. So which would be either VMs or things like containers, such as containers. So when you do that, you will not be able to utilize all the innovations that particular cloud provider is providing. For example, Power BI, right? If you do not have, if you say, no, I have to be portable, you'll have to do all that reports yourself, and you are not able to utilize that. That's example.
Right.
So what I say, right, generally, so if you remember when the cloud itself in about 2012, 2013 time, when people were looking at, why cloud, right? Right now, no one asks why cloud, but at that time it was why cloud, right? Right now, people think, what should I do to cloud and how I should do it. That time also, original thing was, okay, let me look at cloud to save my cost, to convert my capex to opex and all that. But when people started using cloud a lot, and especially infrastructure as a VM, they realized that cost is really not changing much. And then they started looking at the more innovative things, and then people started looking at, no, cloud is not necessarily a cost saving, but it brings me agility and innovation, which are big. So for multi-cloud, right, that's what I said in my article, that people need to figure out that what are they looking from multi-cloud? And I've listed 3 things there. I think generally we should be able to categorize any of the things that we're looking for in those 3 categories. One is doing multi-cloud for availability, we spoke about this something, right? Vendor lock-in, one cloud going down will fall in this. That if I'm having everything in AWS and if AWS service goes down, by the way, there is a fact. No cloud has completely, none of the cloud providers so far, and I've been in cloud market for many years now, I have not seen that. They have declared that whole region has gone down and they have done a movement to their own different region. It hasn't happened. So there have been outages for particular services and all. It has gone to 8 hours, 12 hours and things like that, but I haven't. But there could be a financial risk or or compliance that you have to follow, that you need to keep availability. If one cloud goes down, I should be able to move to another cloud. So that, anyway, this happened in COVID time. Everyone was moving to cloud. Okay, clouds were not down, but most cloud providers were out of capacity. When you go and I want to provision this new thing, you used to get an error, sorry, we're not out of capacity. And that actually happened. So those kind of things can happen, and if you need to kind of ensure yourself this thing, yes, look at from availability. The second thing I would say is portability. Portability is, and that applies to many ISVs. For example, there is an independent software vendor solution. They want to ensure that they are available on each of the platforms, on each of the cloud providers. Then they need to write the code in such a way that it runs everywhere. Whether they use VM or they use an approach like Deepak was saying, abstract that. If you remember the old school thing when we used to, it's not still old school, we still used to write database access layer or data access layer, so that whether it is a SQL server or Oracle server, I can still do my stuff. Still holds true. You can follow the approaches, you can follow containers. For application, it's much easier. For a data layer, it's not that easy. You'll have to figure out what is the approach that you want to. So that's a portability. And the third one is innovation. And that's what we have been talking here, right? I need to use in particular innovation in that cloud provider, which is only provided in that cloud provider and not in others. So look at your area, and out of these three, where do you want, and your strategy will change according to that.
Okay. So I think it gets how should I say? It gets pretty interesting, considering that when we how should I actually tell this? It becomes harder when we try to get, like, do I need to go for a capability or build custom up? So maybe one of the things that is there here, right? Can you comment on how the Arc is going to help in this? It kind of addresses some part of it, Deepak.
So, so I'm not speaking on behalf of Microsoft here, so I cannot say whether Arc, but the intention behind, I understand the intention behind it, right? So the intention behind the Arc is exactly to address all the issues which are being raised here, but again, the decision to use some of these things are more commercial than technical, right? So this is to address the whole fear factor behind that, right? So I would say Microsoft realizes that there is a demand for such a product, right? So they are just filling in that demand, right? So from that perspective, it makes sense, because it is answering all the questions which we asked on this discussion, right? You want to move from one vendor to the other, you want to have seamless connectivity, you want to host a PaaS service. So technically, means this is what I just saw some demos, is technically you can have a PaaS service, Azure PaaS service running on a AWS platform and things like that, right? So which in some ways address a lot of these concerns, but I would say this is a very initial stage of some of these products, right? So you, as architects, you need to evaluate whether this makes sense for you to do it or not, right? So I see Arc as a method for risk reduction for people who are scared of going into a single cloud, right? So this is an option which Microsoft is giving you to have some amount of reduced risk. They say, okay, I'm not logged in, right? So this is also mental satisfaction for a lot of architects and IT business managers. They say, okay, I'm not logged in. I have ability to go across clouds. I can manage downtime, right? So if it is something really, really critical, I can put it on Arc and then we can manage it the way we want it. So the management, so the part which Sanjay mentioned about management, it can be, they're trying to address that part, that how do we reduce this? Because I said the movement is possible by different means, but the management of this movement and management of this architecture is still a problem. So they are trying to address that. How well it will be taken up in the market, I really don't know, right? Whether all of you will take it up or not, I have no idea.
So if I can add, Kumaran, here, right? So I think till some extent, when you're having, let's say, subscriptions or resources in 2 digits and all, right? But when it becomes to thousands of resources and all that, you need something as a central pane or a central dashboard to look at what it is happening, right?
Yeah.
Now, Arc gives you this, but if you look at it, it's not only Microsoft who's done this. There is definitely a demand. So IBM is going big with what they call as a multi-cloud management, which is based on their OpenShift, Red Hat OpenShift. And then Google is going big with their platform called Anthos. The prime driver of all of this originally was hybrid. That I have stuff in my on-prem, I have stuff in Azure. I don't want to go to different places and say, okay, what's happening there, what's happening here. And now, because so many things are happening on Kubernetes, all of these three things I mentioned are primarily targeted towards that. So it is inevitable for the reasons that we discussed, that we will have multi-clouds, we will have environments and different things. But when you have a large estate to manage, it's becoming difficult to manage that, and that's when you will use solutions such as Arc. Everyone has a differentiator, but Anthos or IBM multi-cloud management thing. And if you look at it, there in the other article that I mentioned, there are actually what are coming is cloud management platforms, which are provided from vendors which are not cloud providers like Flexera, like Scalar and things like that. So there's a huge market as per Gartner for that, and that's why people are getting into that.
Okay. So I mean, like, this was something which, for example, right? I think this is so. Just wanted to show this, right? I've been using Power BI, and so it's something like a feature like this, where it's just a graph that is shown, right, of what people are doing. Now, recently, what happened is like this. They kind of make a release every 2 months. You're talking about innovation. I just wanted to show what that actually means. Is something like every 2 months they release a new feature, and because I'm on the cloud, right, actually I could open an existing report which is like this, and they introduced a new thing called summarize. I just have to do a right click and click summarize, and what happens is, if you look at it here, right, what they have actually done is something pretty awesome. It's like they have helped generate text from the graph. Okay, so 0 lines of code, and literally it takes the 2 seconds to do that. Now, this could have been like somebody looking at it and making a PowerPoint. So this kind of shows that there's a 44% decrease between this date and that date, averaged out of 15 kind of a thing, right? So it's kind of from a service provider perspective, if we give lock-in, then I can get more consumers logged on to me, right? Or let's say loyal to me. Logged on might be a wrong word. They'll be more loyal to me because I'm providing value, right? As a provider, if I offer something like this, which kind of makes it interesting, right? So if I think the providers have to give something very compelling to buy my loyalty. They cannot just like that give it. Our price alone will not be a thing where I will give loyalty to them. So a value. So here, for example, this thing uses not just Microsoft Power BI, right? It uses the data, intelligence, machine learning, all that comes together. And without me setting up anything, I get something like that. Siddhama has just joined. Siddhama is an architect with Cognizant, I guess. Siddhama, you have any questions, thoughts around what we are talking about? Multi-cloud, how does it affect you working with multiple customers?
One of the customers which I'm currently working with Capgemini as a solution architect. And one of our enterprise with which whom I'm working, they have multiple clouds, and they have AWS, Azure, OCI, GCP, all of it. And currently they're not even addressing the issues of multi-cloud architecture as such. Things are like, they're just running as they are. Some of their systems are hosted on one flavor of the cloud and some of them are hosted on something else. But we are trying to have that discussion and engagement with the customer to understand their pain points and see if we can bring some business value, because at the end of the day, cloud is about, the expenses that go into it, maintaining it. One interesting aspect which I want to bring up is recently I did this Aviatrix multi-cloud management certification.
Okay.
Now this product in the market, right? I found it very interesting, and I don't think, I'm not aware, at least I've not explored the other like Arc or the IBM cloud multi-cloud management or any other. But I found Aviatrix to be very interesting because they help you to manage multi-cloud, as in it could be Azure, AWS or any other cloud. Currently they are just addressing these four, that is Google, Azure, AWS and Oracle. Yeah. And they give you a dashboard where you can actually look at, what is the speed and all of that. And they give you that the speed between IPsec tunnel can go up to almost 70 gigs and all of that. So I think I found it very, very interesting. But I think still there's a lot more to explore in that area. I was just trying to, assimilate and understand, the new perspectives in multi-cloud. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I found that to be very interesting. I would want to compare that product with the other offerings that Azure or any other big player is providing in multi-cloud. That'd be very interesting to understand how they are catering. But as far as I understand, I think Aviatrix is one of the currently they are the only people who are providing that multi-cloud operations. I don't know if others are providing it better, but I need to compare those. If somebody has done that, please, I'd be more than happy to hear that. If somebody's been able to compare.
We should take that thing about management and how it is as a episode. I think it's a huge thing by itself, and I was telling Sanjay,
it's a more common problem than what we think, right? This scattershot approach, which I call it the scattershot approach, where you have 10 different teams using 5 different clouds. Actually, this gives them more resilience in a very convoluted way because so. But I believe this market is huge because this scattershot is more prevalent than what we would like to be, but it does exist and there is a huge market for such products, and I believe they'll make a lot of money doing it.
So let's say it's a scattershot approach, right? It is more an accident than an incidental or a planned thing, right?
Means nobody that it just happens to be that way, right? No, this is not like planned resilience. This is resilience because of chaos, right? And chaos is inherently very resilient.
Yeah. So to Siddhanshu, right? So the Siddhama. Sorry about that. So in the recent report that Gartner has published on multi-cloud management solutions, I've given that link in my article, but they're saying there are 90 vendors who are just into this space, 90 plus vendors, right?
Okay.
And I wrote that article published previous day, and 2 days back, guess what? Oracle has announced their multi-cloud observation platform about 2 days back. So even they also got into this. So it's a big thing. That's the reason all these big vendors are getting into this.
So it's kind of both exciting, scary, confusing at the same time, right? And it's kind of the role of an architect and architects is becoming even more instant. Because I don't think this problem can be tackled at a pure engineering level. It's much beyond the scope of that. So sounds interesting. I guess obviously 1 hour is too less a time to do justice to a complex topic like this. Probably we could have much more specific series around that, and probably we could take one aspect of it, right? Like the financial view of multi-cloud, the capability view of it, and that could kind of help us sink our teeth in it to a much more deeper level. So thanks. I think slightly we are at time, and I think that's good that all of you could join. Thanks